You know what I'm saying? So the Patriots are not going to deal with off-the-field drama.
Patriots coach explains why he couldn't work with Stefon Diggs anymore. Stefon Diggs helped take the Patriots from 80-1 Super Bowl odds to the biggest game in football. But just one season later, the team walked away. Now, the Patriots coach is finally speaking out. Here's how it came to that point. The timeline, from signing to release. Stefon Diggs arrived in New England in March 2025 with one of the more unlikely stories in recent NFL memory. He had torn his ACL in Week 8 of the 2024 season with the Houston Texans, came off that injury, signed a 3-year, $69 million contract with the Patriots, and within one season found himself helping a team that had been 80-1 odds to win the Super Bowl reach Super Bowl LX. That is the kind of arc that looks like a full redemption story, except it wasn't. Before the season even started, there were signs that the off-field environment around Diggs was going to be harder to manage than anyone wanted to publicly admit. A viral video of him on a yacht generated significant social media attention. Personal relationship drama tied to rapper Cardi B was already circulating in sports media, and for a franchise that has operated for decades on a specific philosophy about what kind of attention it tolerates and what kind it doesn't, those were notes being taken even if no one was saying anything out loud. When Diggs signed, he wasn't shy about why New England felt right. He called Vrabel probably the best coach I've ever had, and specifically pointed to the player-to-coach relationship that Vrabel built as the thing that pulled him to sign. He praised offensive coordinator Josh McDaniels as a little bit of a genius, and talked about wide receivers coach Todd Downing, who had history with him from Minnesota, as someone who changed the way he understood the game from a quarterback's perspective. "I've never had that from a receivers coach before," Diggs said. The relationship on the field backed that up. Diggs led the Patriots with 85 receptions for 1,013 yards, and the gap between him and the second receiver on the roster was not small. He had 37 more targets than the next closest receiver. Matt Collins, the number 2 on the depth chart, had 46 receptions. Diggs had 85. Keyshawn Boutte had 551 receiving yards. Diggs had 1,013. He was Drake May's first option by a wide margin, and in the context of a team that shocked everyone by reaching the Super Bowl, his presence was part of why that run happened at all. One game stands out from the regular season in particular. When the Patriots traveled to Buffalo, Diggs' former team, he caught 10 passes for 146 yards, going back to face the Bills, the team that had traded him out 2 years earlier, and putting up the signature performance of his season. That was the kind of moment that people inside the building pointed to as proof the acquisition had worked. It validated what Vrabel said when he announced the signing. "There's a play style to him that I've always appreciated." That win at Buffalo was part of the run that turned a team with 80-1 Super Bowl odds into a legitimate contender, and Diggs was central to it.
Were you surprised the Patriots cut Stefon Diggs?
I wasn't surprised, man. This guy is a hell of a player. I thought he was a great leader for them guys.
But the regular season version of Diggs and the playoff version of Diggs were two different things. Against the Chargers, 2 catches for 16 yards. Against Houston, 4 catches for 40 yards. Against Denver in the snow, 5 catches for 17 yards. And in Super Bowl LX against Seattle, 3 catches for 37 yards. That is 14 receptions for 110 yards across 4 playoff games and 1 touchdown.
And then the playoffs came, and I look at the productivity in the playoffs, and you can't defend it.
The Patriots lost that Super Bowl to the Seattle Seahawks. After the game, the contract situation entered the picture. Diggs' cap hit was set to balloon from $10.5 million in 2025 to $26.5 million in 2026, with a $6 million roster bonus that would guarantee on March 13th if he remained on the roster. The Patriots asked him to take a restructured deal. He declined. And on March 4th, 2026, the Patriots informed him of his release effective March 11th, 2026, the start of the new league year. It is worth pausing on what the contract refusal means in context. The Patriots were not asking Diggs to take a pay cut for the sake of it. They were asking because they had obligations elsewhere. Christian Gonzalez, their cornerback, was expected to become the highest paid corner in the entire NFL on his upcoming deal, and the cap structure had to reflect that. The team had decisions to make in multiple areas. Diggs was asked to make room. He said no. That is a legitimate position for a player to take. He had earned his contract, but it closed a door that might otherwise have stayed open, even with everything else going on around him. There was reporting that suggested the Patriots may have been willing to absorb some of the off-field friction if the numbers had worked, that if Diggs had restructured, the cost calculation might have made the other issues manageable, because at minimum they would have a known commodity, a proven first option for their developing quarterback, and a veteran presence in a locker room still building its identity under a relatively new head coach. Vrabel's public response was measured. He acknowledged the loss, emphasized Diggs' rehabilitation work, and said not only his future, but what he was able to come in and do for us, and provide leadership and work really hard in the time he was rehabbing from his knee. Those were not the words of a coach who had a personal breakdown in the relationship. They were the words of a coach who ran the math, money, drama, playoff production, cap obligations, and made the business decision. Diggs responded on Instagram, "Thank you for a hell of a year. We family forever." And until we meet again, that was it. 1 season, Super Bowl run, release.
A lot of drama came with Diggs in 1 year. He was there 1 year.
Now, that gets to the real question, because the contract dispute alone does not explain a team walking away from their leading receiver 1 year removed from a Super Bowl appearance. There was more to it. And to understand what that more actually was, you have to go back, not just to his year in New England, but to the pattern that followed him from Minnesota to Buffalo to Houston and finally to Foxborough. The off-field weight, the baggage, Verbal couldn't ignore. Stefon Diggs has always been described by coaches who know him as someone whose personality is inseparable from his talent. His former wide receivers coach at Maryland, Lee Hull, put it plainly in a 2020 interview. His personality, yeah, he's a little flamboyant and he likes to talk, but with his work ethic, no one on the team ever took that the wrong way. And Hull's advice to coaches who wanted to work with Diggs was consistent. You can't change who he is because he's not going to be the same player if you try to change his personality. His college offensive coordinator Michael Locksley made the same observation through a different lens. Locksley described Diggs' drive to win as a gift and a curse, an engine that produced at a Pro Bowl level, but one that required trust and relationship as its fuel. Locksley's key line on Diggs has become almost prophetic when you trace the arc of his career. With Steph, the biggest thing I found is that if he trusts you and you have a real relationship with him, you won't have issues with him. For him, when the trust is broken, you start seeing some of the actions that we've all witnessed. In New England, none of the on-field or coach-related trust issues appeared to be the problem. What broke the organizational threshold was what was happening away from the building entirely, and it started accumulating before the season even kicked off.
Bro, he had the Cardi B drama, the baby mama drama. He got the assault charge with the chef.
Let's put those in order. In the lead up to the 2025 season, a viral video emerged showing Diggs on a yacht handling what spectators described as a pink substance, fueling public speculation about substance use. That wasn't a legal matter. It was a visibility matter. For a franchise that has operated on a specific image of discipline and low-profile professional conduct for decades, a viral boat video is not nothing. It doesn't get you cut, but it goes into a mental file. Then there was the relationship fallout with rapper Cardi B, a public, heavily reported separation that pulled Diggs into a media cycle that had nothing to do with football. Reports tied this to broader stories of Diggs allegedly impregnating multiple women in the same offseason, and at minimum one active paternity suit. All of this was playing out in public, in real time, during the season. Then in December 2025 came something harder to compartmentalize. On December 2nd, 2025, Diggs was accused of slapping and choking his live-in private female chef during a dispute over unpaid wages at his home in Dedham, Massachusetts. He was charged with felony strangulation or suffocation and misdemeanor assault and battery. He pleaded not guilty on February 13, 2026, just days before Super Bowl LX, calling the allegations unsubstantiated and tied to a financial dispute. A pretrial hearing was set for April 1st, 2026. The timing of that arraignment was significant. The Patriots specifically requested a delay until after the Super Bowl, and the court accommodated it. That is a measure of how the organization managed the situation publicly. Do not let it become the story during the run. Address the legal process after the season, but make the football-related decisions once the calendar turned. Diggs was present, playing, contributing, while simultaneously facing active felony charges. That is an unusual environment for any organization to maintain, and it speaks to how deliberately the Patriots handled the optics of the situation before making the final call. Vrabel's public comment on the charges was deliberate. We've made a statement and we've taken the allegations very seriously. I don't think we have to jump to any sort of conclusions right now. Let the process take its toll. That is a coach doing what coaches are supposed to do: reserve judgment, support due process, don't inflame. But the decision that followed 1 month later tells you something about what those words were managing.
You know what I'm saying? So it's just a lot of drama, a lot of attention that's not positive attention coming from New England, and the Patriots don't do that, man.
Shannon Sharpe laid it out on his podcast. I thought he did a great job in the locker room, but I think the distractions off the field are too much for them. Sharpe pointed to the organizational philosophy directly. Knowing that organization, If it ain't football related, they ain't trying to hear about it. Hall of Famer Warren Moon had a similar read. Moon said he was not surprised by the release because Diggs brings a lot of baggage wherever he goes right now. He has off the field stuff and he wasn't as productive over the last part of the season. Moon did note that a veteran team might still take a chance on him despite the risks, but the Patriots, with a specific culture to protect and a young quarterback to develop, weren't in a position to absorb that.
You know what I'm saying? So the Patriots are not going to deal with off-the-field drama.
And there's the added layer that an NFL suspension could follow, even if Diggs is found not guilty. The league does not require a criminal conviction to issue a suspension under the personal conduct policy. There were conversations, captured in the video from the panel discussion, about the reality that...
You're saying you think they said, he won't take this, now we can go ahead and say we tried.
The point being made here is that the NFL's personal conduct policy does not wait for a verdict, and the Patriots were aware of that.
So now we don't know if he's going to be suspended for how many games next year, even if he found not guilty.
So set aside what the charges are, the exposure itself creates a window where the Patriots could be paying $26.5 million for a player who cannot play. That changes the math entirely. The Patriots were already asking him to restructure. He said no. The potential for a suspension, layered on top of a cap hit that had already grown beyond what they were willing to absorb, turned a difficult conversation into a closed one. This is not a situation where Vrabel personally fell out with Diggs. By all accounts, the coaching relationship was genuinely strong, but Vrabel runs an organization, and the organization had made a calculation that the combination of factors, the money, the charges, the noise, the playoff disappearance, and the contract refusal, added up to a decision that couldn't be argued against. The pattern that Lee Hull and Michael Locksley described years ago, the idea that Diggs operates best when trust is intact and the relationship is real, appears to have held. The trust between Diggs and the coaches was there. What failed was the broader organizational contract, and when that breaks, you start seeing some of the actions that we've all witnessed. The pattern and what comes next. What makes the Patriots situation worth examining in depth is that it is not new. The specific details differ, the charges, the city, the coach, but the structure of what happened in New England in 2025 and 26 has played out at every stop of Stefon Diggs' career in some form. In Minnesota, Diggs signed a 5-year, $72 million extension in 2018, stating he wanted to retire a Viking. By 2019, 4 games into the season with 13 receptions and a growing sense of being underutilized in a run-heavy offense, he skipped team meetings and practice, was fined $200,000, and privately told teammates he was done with the Vikings. He later admitted, when reflecting on that period, coming from my old team, up to me wanting to leave and go to another place, I was a good teammate. It wasn't until I wanted to do something else is when I became a bad teammate. That is a direct admission from Diggs himself, not speculation, not media framing. The man said it plainly. In Buffalo, the partnership with Josh Allen started with real chemistry. 127 receptions, 1,535 yards, and 8 touchdowns in 2020, an NFL leading season, but began unraveling in moments that became increasingly visible. In the 2023 divisional round loss to the Bengals, with the Bills down 27-10 and Diggs catching just 4 passes for 35 yards on 10 targets, he confronted Allen on the sideline, raising his arms and yelling after Allen didn't target him on a critical play. Post-game, Diggs left the locker room before coaches arrived and skipped media availability. That offseason, he skipped mandatory minicamp, prompting McDermott to say publicly he was very concerned, and later described 2023 as the worst mental space of his career. He was traded to Houston in April 2024. Each departure has followed a version of the same arc: productive player, building frustration, public friction, eventual exit. What makes this pattern more than just a high-maintenance receiver story is that Diggs himself has been willing to describe it in clear terms. He is not someone who has avoided accountability in these conversations. He admitted to being a bad teammate in Minnesota when he wanted out. He said publicly that his 2023 in Buffalo was his worst mental space in the league. He described his pattern at multiple stops as one where he functions at a high level when trust is intact and begins to fracture when it isn't. That self-awareness is real, but it does not change the organizational mathematics for the teams processing the fallout. In Minnesota, his cryptic tweets, practice absences, and the $200,000 fine did not occur in a vacuum. They coincided with an offense that had had shifted dramatically toward a run-heavy scheme. Diggs' targets dropped from 149 in 2018 to 94 in 2019, despite him remaining one of the most efficient route runners and yards per target producers in the league. He felt, as he later described it, that he was being played small despite being told he was the #1 option. The disconnect between how the team valued him in words versus in target share was what drove the eruption. That is a more sympathetic framing of the Minnesota exit than most coverage gave it at the time. And it's a framing that holds up when you look at what he did in Buffalo the following year. 127 receptions, 1,535 yards, leading the NFL in both categories. He wasn't wrong about what he was capable of when given the role. He just handled the frustration in ways that made the situation untenable before the trade materialized. The Randy Moss parallel that surfaced in the panel discussion is not an accident. Moss came off a 1,200-yard, 13-touchdown season with New England and was traded anyway when he made noise about his contract. The production was not the standard being applied. The standard was conduct. Specifically, whether the noise a player made was more than the organization had budgeted for. Diggs' situation in 2026 follows that template almost exactly, except the noise was not about the contract alone. It was a compounding of multiple simultaneous threads: the contract dispute, the charges, the relationship drama, the potential suspension exposure, and the playoff disappearances. None of those individually would have been fatal. Together, they produced a decision the Patriots could not avoid.
Yeah, a lot of distractions, man. And the Patriots, I never played for them, but Lee did. They fly under the radar except for winning. That's the only thing they boisterous about.
The production question is a real one too. Even setting the off-field factors aside, the playoff disappearances have been a consistent thread. In 4 playoff series with the Bills, Diggs was often a non-factor in elimination games. In New England's Super Bowl run, the same trend appeared. The panel from the video put it directly: his numbers during the regular season gave the Patriots a real weapon. But the moments that define a team's legacy were the moments where that weapon went quiet.
Yeah.
He gave you 1,013 yards and 4 touchdowns. Like, that ain't eye-popping. That ain't just crazy numbers now.
Now the Patriots are left with a hole that is larger than the stat line suggests. Analysts asked point blank what the plan is are not getting reassuring answers. The gap from Diggs to the next receiver was enormous. 85 receptions down to 46, 1,013 yards down to 551. You do not absorb that kind of drop-off easily, especially with a young quarterback in only his second full season as a starter.
I think they have to make a trade now to fill Stefon Diggs' spot, whether that's A.J. Brown or maybe DK Metcalf becomes available.
The Patriots have already signed Romeo Doubs, a former Green Bay Packer who Greg Bedard of CLNS Media describes as a direct Diggs replacement.
I look at Doubs as he's a Stefon Diggs replacement. He is a slot. He has inside-outside versatility, but you wouldn't call him an ex-wide receiver.
Doubs brings durability questions of his own. He has not played a full 17-game season, but Bedard's point is about role fit rather than star power. Doubs is not being brought in as an alpha. He is being brought in as someone who can operate in the slot, run disciplined routes, take contact, and give Drake May a reliable intermediate option. That is functionally what Diggs was.
I agree with Greg. This is your Stefon Diggs replacement. This is your number 2 guy.
But analysts and media have been direct about what Romeo Doubs is not, the answer to the number 1 question. The Patriots reportedly still have interest in chasing a true WR1. A.J. Brown was named as the top target in that tier, while Doubs fills the Diggs slot in the interim. The comparison to Randy Moss, raised during the panel discussion, is instructive. Moss came off a 1,200-yard, 13-touchdown season with the Patriots and was still moved out because of noise around his contract situation. The production was not the primary factor. The principle was.
That's how Moss got up out of there. Moss coming off a 1,200-yard, 13-touchdown season. He making noise about a contract. Man, I need a new deal. Trade it. Get up out of here. Go back to the Vikings, bro. You know what I'm saying? Go back to the Vikings if you don't like what we got going. They're not dealing with the noise, period.
Diggs' story is not finished. His NFL future remains open. Denver was mentioned as a potential suitor, and Moon's point that a veteran team might roll the dice on him is a reasonable prediction. He is 32, coming off a season where he posted 1,000 yards on a Super Bowl team, and the legal matter remains unresolved. There will be a market, but the question of why Mike Vrabel couldn't work with Stefon Diggs anymore is not a mystery. It is a calculation. The relationship between coach coach and player was real. The production was real. The contribution to the Super Bowl run was real. What was also real was a $26.5 million cap obligation, a refusal to restructure, active felony charges, and a pattern of off-field noise that had now followed Diggs to a third consecutive team in a 3-year span. Vrabel made the call that the football value did not offset all of that.
There's players that you deal with the drama, like Pickens, who it's like, you know what, I could deal with that. And then there's players like Diggs where it's like he doesn't have Pickens numbers where it's worth the 75 headlines that he produced this season. Yeah, hopefully Diggs gets his stuff together because he did lose the Super Bowl, lost Cardi B and his team in 1 month.
Vrabel built a relationship with Diggs that Diggs himself called the best coaching experience of his career. That relationship did not break down. What broke down was everything around it. That brings us to the end of this video. For more interesting videos like this, click on the cards on your screen.